There was a time when I was blissfully ignorant, believing my marriage was unbreakable. That illusion was shattered when I discovered my wife, Zara, had been both unfaithful and deceitful. My name is David Harris, but my friends call me Dave. I'm passionate about physical fitness, spending 5 days a week at the gym. At 6'3" and 192 pounds, I prioritize taking care of myself. 8 years ago, I left the corporate world behind to start my own successful business. Meanwhile, Zara has been working for a well-known company, one of the top 50 largest. She's dedicated 24 years to the same company, starting as an OT analyst just a month after we got married. About 5 years ago, she moved into a role as a training unit instructor to keep up with technological advances. Her job requires her to attend at least 20 days of training programs every year. At 46, Zara is still stunning, standing at 5'8" and weighing 118 pounds. She doesn't look like a typical mother of two. Every morning, she joins 6 other neighborhood women for a rigorous 6-mile run at dawn. Our 22-year-old daughter, Alice, recently graduated from Florida State University. Following in her mother's footsteps, she became a dedicated first-grade teacher in Naples. Running has become a family activity, with Alice joining her mother's running group since she was 14. I'm thrilled she enjoys the beer I brew, my hobby, and she even joined a beer club in Naples, which we attend together whenever we can. Our 21-year-old son, Sam, just graduated from the University of Florida. He's eager to further his education, and although he wants to work in my business, I've told him he needs 5 years of experience in corporate America first. I believe real-world experience is essential for his development. My wife despises beer and can't stand its smell in our house, so I plan my beer brewing around her trips like her current one to Dallas, giving me the perfect chance to make a refined English brown ale. Life seemed perfect, but I had no idea that major changes were coming. Last Wednesday at 8:30 p.m., Jack, a member of my beer club, asked if I could pick him up from the airport. Without hesitation, I agreed. While waiting at the baggage claim, I saw 3 people who turned out to be Zara's colleagues. Curiosity got the best of me, and I wondered why Zara wasn't with them. I called her office line, which was unusual since I typically contact her on her personal mobile phone. Her office voicemail informed me she would be out of the Dallas office until Wednesday, teaching classes. She mentioned she wouldn't be home on Thursday and Friday, asking to leave a message with a promise to return calls on Monday. Approaching Jack, I explained my confusion. He suggested I talk to Mark, a fellow beer club member and a detective in the local police. Deciding to get to the bottom of this, I called Zara. During our conversation, I told her I wanted to hear her voice. She said she couldn't wait to hug me and mentioned her Friday flight would depart early, allowing her to fall asleep in my arms. When I asked if she could come home sooner, she said she had to stay and fulfill her duties, emphasizing it would be unfair to neglect them. She reassured me of her love and said she'd see me on Friday. The idea that Zara might have cheated on me for the first time was disturbing. Despite the late hour, I met Mark for a beer, and we discussed our next steps. I confided in Mark about my suspicions, and he sympathetically offered his help. I thought Zara was cheating because, at the airport, I saw 3 of her colleagues leaving with luggage, suggesting they'd spent the week with her. Despite her voicemail saying she'd be in Dallas until Wednesday and on vacation until Monday, she told me she'd be teaching classes until Friday. Mark listened carefully and suggested I contact Robert Smith, who might have more information. I thanked Mark and planned to contact Robert the next morning. As the sun rose, Robert Smith appeared, prompted by Mark. After recounting my story, Robert asked me if I had been happily married for over 24 years, and if I was truly ready to uncover the truth. Intrigued, I asked why he posed such a question. Robert cautiously explained that based on his experience, most marriages in such situations ended in divorce. He asked me to consider how much information I really wanted, how far back we should look, what my budget was for the investigation, and if I was ready to handle the information we found. Shocked, I sat in silence before finally saying, "Robert, I need to know every detail. When, where, and with whom. I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to find out the truth. If I've been deceived, I want to know to what extent." We decided that Robert would contact a trusted private detective in Dallas to investigate Zara's background. Additionally, one of his team members would review the training schedule. I was instructed to reach out to the 3 teachers I saw at the airport. While waiting for their responses, I meticulously searched the house for any clues, not knowing what to look for or where to start. I avoided the living room, dining room, kitchen, Alice's and Sam's rooms, and began with Zara's dresser. I found nothing unusual, though everything seemed familiar. Opening the closet, I saw numerous boxes and decided to shift my attention to the bathroom. Unfortunately, I found no hidden information from Zara there. Returning to her closet, I remained determined to find some clue. I started with her hanging clothes and went through shoeboxes meticulously, looking for anything strange or suspicious. Despite thoroughly searching our bedroom, the guest bedroom, the study, the garage, and the attic, I couldn't make sense of anything. Around 5 p.m., Robert arrived and quickly set up surveillance cameras in all the bedrooms, the office, and the kitchen. He also installed a voice recorder. After securing the house, we went to the airport and found Zara's car. The trunk had a GPS system, and a voice recorder was discreetly placed under the front seat. Back at the house, Robert and I had a light ale, and he briefed me. Zara's class schedule varied from 3 to 5 days, depending on the location. For example, classes in Dallas lasted 3 days, from Monday to Wednesday. Ben, Luke, and Sue flew out on Sunday afternoon and returned on Wednesday evening. Teaching materials were sent to the location a week before the class, but teachers weren't responsible for their placement and transportation. Designated employees handled those tasks. As I sat there trying to control my anger, I thought of my father's advice about keeping anger in check for clear thinking. Annoyed, I struggled to keep my emotions under control. I burst into the kitchen, my frustration boiling over. Zara had been lying to me this whole time, and there had to be consequences. Turning to Robert, I asked if he had uncovered anything during his search. Unfortunately, he reported that he found nothing suspicious, except that Zara frequently washed her clothes. After discussing the situation, we decided that Robert would intercept her bag at the airport, and I would find a way to disable the washing machine to delay her from doing laundry immediately. Before leaving, Robert mentioned his contact in Dallas, who was at Zara's hotel, and planned to talk to him in the morning before calling me. After Robert left, I realized I couldn't bear to sleep in our bedroom and opted for Sam's bed. Needless to say, I hardly slept. Trying to stick to my daily routine, I went to the office. We arranged to meet at my house later that day. Robert arrived at 2 o'clock, carrying a stack of documents. The report from our Dallas contact had come through email with attached photos. Robert showed me a picture of 6 people gathered at a restaurant table, 3 women and 3 men sitting in pairs. He asked if I recognized any of them. Staring at the photo, I finally said the only person I could identify was Zara. To get a better look, he handed me individual photos of each person. I scrutinized their faces in silence, taking my time. Handing one of the photos back to Robert, I mentioned that one person looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't recall where I had seen him before. While we ate, Robert shared some intriguing information. There were video cameras on every hotel floor, pointed at the corridors. We started examining the next set of pictures, which showed our group leaving the restaurant, entering the elevator, and eventually getting off on the 7th floor. Interestingly, the women went to room 7007, and the men to room 7009. On Friday morning at 10:29, photos showed 2 men leaving room 7009. Later images captured them exiting the elevator, walking down the hall, and leaving through the front door. These photos suggested a friendly or professional relationship rather than a romantic one. Robert noted that they went to a nearby restaurant for lunch, each covering their own bill. Additional hotel photos later showed them carrying luggage to the elevator, then heading to the reception desk to check out. With a serious expression, Robert asked if I was sure I wanted to uncover all the details. Without hesitation, I affirmed my decision. Robert paused, maintaining eye contact, then continued. Meanwhile, I received another folder with more information. I won't go into the conversation details, but I learned that agents from Dallas had entered rooms 7007 and 7009, recording everything meticulously. It turned out that these rooms were connected by an internal door. To gather evidence, they sent sheets for DNA analysis, carefully packed used glasses for fingerprinting, and examined the garbage thoroughly. According to the agent, the rooms had a strong closeness smell, and stains were found on all 4 beds. We would need to wait for lab results to determine if Zara actively participated or just observed. Robert and I found it hard to believe otherwise, considering her likely involvement. It was painful to see the deceitful and unfaithful behavior of the woman I married. As for our next move, we decided to start by disabling the washing machine before she returned tonight. We disconnected a wire connected to the motor. I think Robert assigned me this simple task to help me process everything. Back in the kitchen, Robert suggested taking a DNA sample from me and asked if I could find a comb with hair from each of the children. Perplexed, I asked why. He suspected that the children might not be mine and expressed my confusion. "You wanted full transparency, didn't you?" he mused. He confirmed that one strand of hair from each of them would be enough. Robert carefully packaged my sample as number 1, Sam's as number 2, and Alice's as number 3. We managed to take a strand from Zara, numbered as 4. Tomorrow morning, these samples would be sent to the lab. Robert had a contact at the airport who would try to intercept Zara's luggage, delaying her return due to the necessary procedures related to the missing baggage claim. After addressing these issues, our conversation shifted to how I should behave around Zara. Could I greet her warmly, hug and kiss her? Could I listen to her fabricated stories about the trip? Could I invite her to dinner tomorrow and engage in intimate activities with her? How long and convincingly could I keep up the pretense? Robert mentioned that his team needed time to collect and analyze evidence, warning that it could take several months to uncover the full extent of Zara's actions. Could I stay calm for that long? I promised him I was willing to do whatever it took to uncover the truth. Robert asked if I could go on a 3 or 4 day business trip out of town. Thinking about who I could visit without arousing Zara's suspicion, I smiled and said I'd visit a longtime client in St. Louis. I planned to tell Zara about my trip on Monday morning, with my return scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I asked Robert why he wanted me to leave. He explained that if Zara had any hidden motives, she might avoid suspicious actions while I was away to prevent arousing doubts. She might let her guard down and make a mistake. I sensed she had enjoyed her weekend and was eager to resume a relationship with someone. Unfortunately, her office lacked video surveillance, but we wondered if there was something she always carried that we could use to our advantage. Perhaps we could discreetly attach a small bug to it. After pondering, I suggested her briefcase. Robert admitted it wasn't perfect, but better than nothing. He'd leave a bug with me to attach to her briefcase that evening. It was time for him to go. Was I ready for the show? I replied with a simple yes. As Robert was about to leave, he mentioned that if I had the chance, I should check for liquid stains on Zara's underwear tonight or tomorrow morning. Good night. Call me if you get a chance this weekend, and remember to stay calm. I settled on the back terrace with a porter in hand, letting my thoughts wander. Apart from Zara planning to do laundry early Saturday morning, nothing made me doubt her intentions. Just before dawn, my morning was interrupted by a call from Robert. He informed me that Zara's luggage had reached the lab successfully. He emphasized the need to remain calm, as her typical travel fatigue mixed with disappointment over the airline mishandling her belongings. Zara was notably upset about losing 2 new pairs of trousers, but reassured me that the rest of the essentials were safe in her carry-on. Seeking comfort, she embraced me, expressing her love and relief at being back home. She shared how much she had missed me while she was away. After a brief hug and kiss, she headed upstairs for a relaxing bath. Meanwhile, I discreetly attached a bug to her briefcase and sat down in front of the TV, lost in thought about our past moments together. As Zara settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling of the love she had shown, despite her fatigue and the inconvenience of the lost luggage. Her happiness to be home was evident. Reflecting on my efforts compared to her dedication, I realized I needed to step up my game. I had to improve and ensure she wouldn't see through my facade. Determined to handle the situation, I put aside my doubts and headed upstairs to prepare for bed, hoping we could find solace in each other's arms. Saturday morning arrived and Zara overslept, likely because she had no pressing need to do laundry right away. Before taking a shower, I inspected her underwear and a basket of dirty laundry, feeling uneasy about invading her privacy. Though I wasn't an expert, I found nothing unusual. After my bath, I went downstairs, made coffee, and fetched the newspaper, waiting for Zara. When I poured my 3rd cup of coffee, she came into the kitchen, wrapped in a bathrobe and smiling. I greeted her cheerfully. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Seeing her well-rested, I joked that she looked ready to conquer the day. I offered her a cup of coffee, and she gratefully accepted, smiling. I quipped that maybe I should lose her luggage more often if it led to such delightful vacations. After breakfast, I attended to my tasks outside. A few hours later, Zara mentioned she was going to the grocery store and asked if I needed anything. I politely declined, saying, "No thanks." While she was out, I planned to transfer a batch of English brown ale from the primary fermenter to the secondary. That evening, we dined at our favorite Italian restaurant, sharing stories from the past week and discussing future plans. I talked about my recent trip to St. Louis, and she expressed relief at being home after her exhausting travels. She mentioned that if her luggage wasn't found by Wednesday, she would go shopping for replacements. I was relieved that she hoped no one would find out about it, except for those old trousers she cherished. I grinned and shared more details about my latest batch of English brown ale. We decided to wrap up the evening early, and I made 2 cases of my homemade beer before heading to St. Louis. Driving to St. Louis, a journey I enjoy because it gives me time to think, I found my thoughts drifting back to Zara. Usually I think about my business on long drives, but this time, she was all I could think about. On the way, I called Robert and updated him about my weekend. He had no new information, but assured me he would keep me posted. Lost in thought, I realized that 4 hours had flown by. I called Robert again, ready to get down to business. I asked him to honestly share his gut feeling. After a moment of silence, Robert revealed that he and Joe in Dallas believed Zara had been involved in multiple affairs for a long time. They couldn't imagine her simply observing long hours of intimate meetings without participating. The way she and her colleagues interacted showed a level of comfort and confidence that had clearly developed over years. I sensed that Robert's conclusions about Zara and her colleagues might not sit well with me. According to Robert, their contact reported that the group discussed their work and families with remarkable ease, covering their own expenses and making sure to interact with everyone. This group had a long-standing connection, and while they kept a friendly atmosphere in public, they partied wildly in private. Robert's last words to me were about needing to decide what to do about Zara and the others. After that, I contacted my lawyer, Andrew Harris, the best divorce lawyer in the state. Briefly explaining the situation, he assured me that Dave Lewis would contact me soon. Once I was settled in my hotel room, I called Zara to let her know I had arrived safely in St. Louis, then confirmed my golf plans with Jim. Around 9:30 p.m., Robert called to check on me. I told him I had given his name to my lawyer and that Andy would be in touch with Dave Lewis. Robert chuckled, noting that Dave Lewis's reputation alone could intimidate any lawyer Zara hired. I was exhausted and desperate for this situation to end. If they wanted to play dirty, I was ready to match their tactics. On Tuesday, I spent the day with Jim on the golf course. Around 1 p.m. on Wednesday, Robert called to ask about my schedule. I told him I was free until the end of the day and planned to head home on Thursday morning. At 2 p.m., Dave Lewis contacted me, and I updated him on the situation. His approval of my actions was a relief. He praised Robert's company, considering it one of the best. After learning my plans, Dave asked what I intended to do if Zara was proven unfaithful. I told him I wanted a divorce. However, to fully grasp the situation, I needed to wait for the investigation to conclude. I suggested starting the divorce process, citing infidelity. Our conversation then shifted to gathering evidence during Zara's upcoming classes and discussing how I could maintain a normal facade for several months. Dave mentioned the possibility of a quick no-fault divorce in Georgia, but noted that proving infidelity would be more advantageous. After further discussion, I realized I needed to carefully consider my approach to the divorce. That evening, at 9 p.m., there was a sudden knock on my door. To my surprise, Mark and Robert were standing there. I asked about their unexpected visit, and Robert replied with some unpleasant news he wanted to share in person. Mark didn't know the details, but thought it would be good for me to have a friend present. It was up to me whether Mark stayed. Despite the seriousness, I wanted Mark to stay. Seated, I met Robert's eyes. He revealed that test results confirmed Zara's active participation. Shockingly, traces of all 6 individuals' activities were found on one bed, even though each woman had her own bed. Our evidence strongly suggested that each woman had intimate relations with all 3 men in their group. Identifying Zara was possible thanks to the DNA sample taken from our home. "Dave, I'm sorry for how things turned out," Robert said. I was stunned, struggling to grasp the situation. Time seemed to stand still as I sat in silence, trying to calm down and suppress my growing rage. Finally, I found the courage to speak, doubting anything could be worse than discovering my wife was involved with 5 other people. Robert, with a slight cough, revealed the unthinkable truth. 2 of these men were the biological fathers of our children, Sam and Alice. I wasn't their father. This news hit me like a ton of bricks. I jumped up, demanding an explanation. How can this be? My children aren't mine? Robert tried to calm me, saying, Dave, we can use this information to our advantage. For more than 24 years, this woman had been engaging in an extramarital relationship, deceiving and manipulating me the entire time. As I paced the room, my mind raced to comprehend the devastating news. My once perfect world was crumbling, and I couldn't fathom how to navigate this new reality. The realization that neither Sam nor Alice were my biological children was staggering, and the fact that my wife had a long-term affair with one of my supposed partners made it even worse. Robert accurately assessed the gravity of the situation, making it clear that the consequences would be severe. Determined to show my resilience, I let my emotions transition from shock and disbelief to anger and resolve. Time seemed to freeze as I walked back and forth, unaware of how much time had passed. It became evident that Robert and Mark had come to St. Louis not just to support me, but also to prevent any impulsive actions. When I finally regained my composure, we discussed my position and plans. I made it clear that Zara had to answer for her actions. Despite my lack of sleep, their presence was a much-needed support. I doubted I could have managed without them. With the necessary evidence in hand, we carefully planned the most effective measures. A divorce from Zara would be loud and humiliating for her, though I'd have to endure embarrassment as well. Over time, the truth about Alice and Sam's paternity would become public, exposing Zara's infidelity. In Georgia, both parties can file for a no-fault divorce, which involves filing, waiting 30 days, and then finalizing the divorce and dividing the property. However, filing for divorce based on infidelity is a longer process, requiring months to set a court date and present evidence. Despite my desire to drag Zara through court for her infidelity, Mark, Robert, and Dave convinced me that a no-fault divorce would be faster, more economical, and still embarrassing for her and her partners. Now, I just needed to decide when to proceed with the divorce. Back in Atlanta, we gathered in Robert's conference room to review our information and plan our next steps. I curiously asked if Zara had engaged in any suspicious activities while I was in St. Louis. Robert reported that she hadn't done anything wrong and hadn't had any inappropriate phone conversations. Continuing, Robert mentioned that we had tracked the group's actions over the past 5 years. Interestingly, 2 members consistently booked adjacent rooms, though the specific people varied. Most often, all 6 were present, but there were times when only 4 were there, with 1 woman and 3 men. I didn't expect such developments and expressed my despair by slamming the table and calling it cheating. I demanded that Robert thoroughly investigate the group, including Zara, and uncover all details. I wanted to know their marital status, the duration of their relationships, and if the children were being deceived by their supposed fathers. Additionally, I needed information on their employment and residences. With Zara's schedule in hand, Robert gathered details about her upcoming classes and their locations, allowing him to develop a plan for installing cameras and bugs in hotel rooms. While this evidence couldn't be used in court, it would help me secure a guilt-free divorce. An interesting detail in Zara's calendar showed that she had 3 classes scheduled before our upcoming 25th wedding anniversary, which fell on a Sunday, with her last class ending on a Friday in Orlando. Observing this group, I decided that our anniversary would mark the end of our relationship. I chose not to participate in any celebrations with her, as her gift would be the end of my suffering and the beginning of her facing the consequences of her deceit. A week later, we gathered in Dave's conference room, eagerly awaiting news from Robert. As I settled in, I reflected on the journey we had been through. The group, known as the Gang of 6, included Anthony C. Walker from Richmond, Virginia, Edward S. Brown from Little Rock, Arkansas, Richard K. Turner from Columbia, South Carolina, Linda D. Davis from Miami, Florida, Margaret G. Wilson from Knoxville, Tennessee, and of course, Zara. They had met 24 years ago during a training program for new employees of the same organization. When Zara's last class on Wednesday arrived, We gathered around the conference table, ready for the latest update. The previous week in Washington, Zara and Edward occupied adjoining rooms, while the others were scattered on different floors. Zara and Edward slept in the same room, and no woman entered or left the men's rooms. Their professional interactions during the day contrasted sharply with their nighttime behavior. After 10 p.m., they dispersed to their rooms, returning only after 2 a.m. except for Thursday night, when all six stayed in adjacent rooms. Once again, Robert's agents discreetly entered the rooms posing as cleaning staff. Close contacts occurred only in adjacent rooms, making it easier to collect hair samples and fingerprints. Sheets from each room were gathered along with samples of women's underwear. The DNA evidence confirmed the truth. Anthony was Alice's father, and Rick was Sam's biological father. Zara faced the consequences of her unprotected encounters with multiple partners, making it impossible to determine true paternity. Anthony C. Walker from Richmond, Virginia, had been married for 24 years with 2 adult children. Neither he nor his wife knew they were about to discover they had another daughter. Similarly, Edward S. Brown from Little Rock, Arkansas, had been married for 23 years with twin sons who had just turned 21. Richard K. Turner from Columbia, South Carolina, had been married to his high school sweetheart for 25 years, resulting in a son. Rick was on the brink of uncovering the truth that he had another son. Linda D. Davis from Miami, Florida, was happily preparing to celebrate her 25th wedding anniversary. She was the proud mother of a 23-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, Margaret G. Wilson from Knoxville, Tennessee, had been married for 23 years and was the mother of 2 daughters and a son. All the members of the friendly group, known as the Gang of Six, had been married for over 23 years and appeared content, except for Rick, who had recently discovered the painful reality of his wife's infidelity. We were curious if any of these men could be the fathers of Linda's or Margaret's children. It seemed likely that at least one of them was, and their spouses probably wanted to know as well. Robert hoped to have answers by next Wednesday, although his plans remained unclear. In a brief meeting at Dave's office on Wednesday, Robert informed us that the classes in Orlando lasted only 3 days, which was surprising. Next Thursday and Friday, the group planned to spend time together before our anniversary. Zara's complete lack of respect for me was undeniable, and she would have to face the consequences. As I calmed down, Robert reminded me that I wasn't the only spouse dealing with children who had different biological fathers. Edward was the father of both Linda's daughter and Margaret's son. Margaret had 2 daughters, fathered by Anthony and Rick. Surprisingly, Linda was the only woman who had at least one child whose father was her husband. It was all quite confusing, and I felt like I needed a flowchart to keep track of it all. Even though my marriage was over, and I had gone through all the stages of grief, I found the strength to maintain the appearance of a loving husband. It became a sort of game for me. I pretended to be affectionate while secretly planning how to ruin my future ex-wife, Zara, who had cheated on me for over 24 years. If she could lie to my face for so long, I could certainly pretend to be a devoted, caring, albeit forgetful husband for a few more months. Robert's team planned to carry out the same procedures in San Diego as they did in Washington. They were going to meticulously examine the collected records and evidence, hoping to uncover all the missing details. With unwavering confidence, they expected everything to unfold the same way as in Washington. Personally, I couldn't contain my excitement about the upcoming trip to Orlando and was eager to think about how to turn their lives into a nightmare. Unfortunately, Margaret couldn't join us in San Diego, but since the classes in Orlando lasted 3 days, all 6 of us agreed to attend them. The prospect of spending 2 days without the presence of colleagues, where we could maneuver freely, filled us with joyful anticipation. Zara clearly neglected our anniversary by choosing to spend time with her comrades instead of rushing back to the one she supposedly loved. She didn't know that I had already planned to be their instructor for Wednesday afternoon. In the presence of all the students, I would hold the final hour of classes, ensuring everyone witnessed the final reckoning of the Gang of Six. Dave Lewis and his team were well informed and prepared to process the necessary legal documents. He guaranteed that everything would be ready on time. In addition, Robert ordered his staff to be present and closely monitor the group members. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Dave, Robert, Mark, and I developed a strategy to protect ourselves and expose their vulnerabilities. Once the groundwork was laid, my moment finally came. After Zara's departure, I took the initiative to establish contact with the spouses of the Gang of Six. I shared my plan to surprise my wife in Orlando in honor of our 25th wedding anniversary and 25 years of service with the company. Considering their spouses had joined the company around the same time as mine, I thought their presence would be appreciated by everyone. As a token of gratitude, I booked flights that would be waiting for them at the boarding gate. I informed Sam and Alice of the plan to surprise their mother on Wednesday and invited them to meet me in Orlando on Tuesday. That evening, I gathered with the children and told them all the details. We spent several hours discussing how I discovered the truth, the evidence I had gathered, and my intentions to expose their mother the next day. Most importantly, I emphasized how much I cherished them. During our heartfelt conversation, I assured them that even though I might not be their biological father, I would always be a loving father to them. We hugged tightly, and tears flowed down our faces. They had many questions, and I tried to answer them honestly, without sugarcoating anything. I begged them not to tell their mother, and they both promised to keep it a secret. Looking into their eyes, I asked if they would accompany me the next day when I confronted their mother and exposed her. I acknowledged that it was a significant request and apologized if it made them uncomfortable. Unfortunately, the fact that they weren't my biological children would soon be made public in the Atlanta newspapers, leading to inevitable shame for all of us. If they decided to come, they would witness my harsh confrontation with their mother and her companions. I may say things that might embarrass you, but please know that nothing will change how I feel about you, I told them. Since you're already adults, I can't legally adopt you, although I would if I could. Despite everything, I want you to know that I sincerely love you both and consider you my children. It's up to you to decide whether you will attend because, in the end, she is your mother. Take your time, think about everything, and make your decision. Just know that I will love you now and forever. Sam, with tears in his eyes, asked, "Dad, I understand that Mom loves you and you love her. Can you find it in your heart to forgive her and move on? Why don't you both go to a psychologist to sort this out?" Looking at my children, I tried to stay calm. How could I answer such questions rationally? Taking a deep breath, I began. Close your eyes and let me take you on a journey. Imagine meeting someone extraordinary, someone you consider your perfect match, the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. The thought of being apart is unbearable. After a magical honeymoon, you build your careers together, have 2 wonderful children, and your life revolves around your family's happiness. You support your loved ones in all their pursuits, from football training to cheerleading camps, from adolescence into adulthood. You cherish every moment together, holding them close, grateful for the joy and happiness they bring. I paused, watching their faces. Now imagine watching a movie with your beloved. In one scene, she is in a hotel room with 3 men and 2 women. Each woman draws a card from a deck, and your wife's face lights up when she reveals her ace of spades. Sam, in this scenario, do you still believe in your wife's love for you? Alice, imagine your husband is one of the men in that room. How do you feel about forgiveness now? Would you seek help from a psychologist to work through it? Sam's eyes filled with tears and Alice sobbed beside him. They needed time to process my words. As the scene in their minds played out, it became clear how deeply they were affected. Continuing, I said, imagine discovering that your spouse isn't the biological parent of your children, or worse, that they fathered someone else's child. How would you feel? Now consider that your partner leaves you and your children a day early to engage in these activities, extending their stay for more. When they return, it takes them a whole day to recover before being with you. How much love and respect do you think they have for their spouse or children? Your mother didn't just lie to me. She disrespected both of you too. Sam, holding back tears, admitted he hadn't thought about it that way. He acknowledged that he wouldn't want his wife to treat him similarly and hadn't expected his mom to prefer spending time with her group over being at home. He expressed love for me, but was unsure about being there tomorrow, apologizing for the pain I was going through. He promised to keep me posted, adding that if his wife ever did such a thing, he'd give her a good kick. Alice thanked me for being a wonderful father and expressed her love. She noted that Sam seemed to put his interests ahead of theirs, just as their mom did. Alice said she would be there tomorrow and encouraged Sam to step up and be responsible. Taken aback by Alice's reaction, I admired my children with a burning look. Alice asked about the plan for tomorrow. I explained, I've invited the spouses of the gang of 6 to join us tomorrow for a surprise celebration. They think we're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. Since they've been with your mother all these years, I thought it would be fitting for them to be part of it. You and Sam are the only ones who know about this in advance. I plan to present all the evidence I have, so they can react to their unfaithful partners. And remember, you have step-siblings you might want to meet later. All 5 remaining partners joined us at the hotel, and we had a chance to get acquainted over a delicious lunch. At 2 p.m., our group, including Sam, went to the hotel where Zara's class was being held. When we entered the lobby, the rest of my unexpected guests were already waiting, including a lawyer from Dave Lewis's office, Robert's employee, and an experienced videographer. A florist arrived at 2:30 p.m. to deliver 25 red roses I had ordered. Alice and the other women admired their beauty. Alice's eyes blazed with determination as she prepared for the confrontation. I assured her everything was under control. At exactly 2:45 p.m., we headed to the meeting room with Alice leading the way and Sam following. The couple, overcome with anticipation, looked no less excited. Carrying the bouquet of roses, I entered Zara's classroom at 3 p.m., accompanied by Jonathan Taylor and his video camera. Zara's face turned crimson when she saw me approaching with flowers and a smile. I playfully remarked that her blush perfectly matched the roses, prompting laughter from everyone present. Zara glanced at me and then turned to the class, introducing me as her beloved husband. Scanning the room, I noticed the other 5 people scattered around, just as I had expected. Turning back to Zara, I announced that since today was the last day of classes, I wanted to make this day unforgettable for her. I mentioned that this Sunday we would be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. Right on cue, a group led by Alice emerged from the hallway, and the photographer captured a priceless picture of Zara's stunned face. The members of her close group appeared to be in complete panic. Grinning broadly, I watched as Alice introduced Zara to the spouses of her friends involved in the infidelity. Alice seemed to relish the unfolding drama, and I realized her future husband should be cautious. I reiterated that we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary and asked for their help to make it special. I also mentioned that next month would mark Zara's 25th anniversary with the company, making it a significant time for 2 major celebrations. As Anthony, Edward, Rick, Linda, and Margaret joined us at the front of the room, they received applause from the other participants. Alice stood next to me, clearly anticipating what was coming. Taking her hand, I led her to Anthony and introduced him as Alice's biological father. Zara's face turned pale, and she looked like she had seen a ghost. Anthony's wife stared at me in disbelief, asking me to repeat what I had just said. I confirmed that Anthony was indeed Alice's biological father. Anthony found his voice and asked why I thought he was Alice's father. Extending my hand, the lawyer placed 3 documents in my palm. I handed Anthony the first document, explaining it was a petition for a court-ordered paternity test. The second document was a lawsuit demanding 21 years of unpaid alimony and compensation for emotional suffering. The final document was a lawsuit against his employer for failing to uphold moral obligations in his employment contract. I assured Anthony's wife that I had copies of all the evidence she could use at her discretion. The room descended into chaos as the other spouses realized this wasn't a joyful celebration. Amidst the turmoil, I found comfort in my own amusement. Sam approached me, stood tall, and silently nodded in appreciation. Pride welled up in me as I looked at Sam. Guiding him to Rick, I introduced Sam to his biological father, Richard Turner. An eerie silence filled the room as I repeated the process with Rick, handing him the necessary documents. Rick's wife, concerned, asked if I had copies, and I confirmed I did. With the realization that Zara had only 2 children, a sense of calm settled over the room. Smiling, I anticipated that the rest of the group wouldn't escape unscathed. They had enjoyed their games, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. Zara sat on a chair, tears streaming down her face. I announced that since my appearance had caught them by surprise, they should get ready because the real fun was about to begin. A hush fell over the room as I continued, revealing a secret that had been buried for 5 long months. I disclosed that Linda, Margaret, Anthony, Rick, and Edward had attended classes together for over 2 decades, avoiding their duties. This charade had been going on for over 20 years. Discussing this revelation, I couldn't help but mention Alice, who had just turned 23. The truth was finally out, and the consequences were about to unfold. I explained, Edward is the biological father of Linda's daughter and Margaret's son. Alice is Anthony's biological child. Sam's biological father is Rick, while Margaret's daughter is also Anthony's child. Of the 7 children these 3 women have, only one is the child of their spouse. The room erupted in chaos as the spouses processed the shocking information. I won't delve into the rest of the details, but imagine a scenario where all the necessary legal documents have been successfully delivered. Copies were given to the spouses, leading to a massive upheaval within the group of 6 people. Handing Zara the divorce papers, I firmly stated that she should not contact me, return home, or attempt to see me again. I expressed my deep disappointment in her deceitful actions. Sitting in my hotel room later, I pondered the events related to Zara and her friends. My thoughts were interrupted by Alice, who suddenly appeared next to me. Initially, I had planned to confront Zara gradually, addressing each member of her group and eventually revealing the truth about the children. However, Alice had a strong desire to meet her biological father face to face. I decided to abandon my original plan and go with the flow. My main goal was to inform the group of 6 about their infidelity and expose them to their spouses. I wanted to publicly shame them in front of my colleagues and take legal action against them by handing them the claim documents. As a result, their spouses were left furious, bringing me a sense of satisfaction and self-confidence. A sudden knock pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my children standing there. After a warm greeting, I asked what brought them to my door. Alice hugged me tightly, expressing her love. She acknowledged my reluctance to talk about their mother, but explained that Zara was in a fragile state. Alice had decided to take her home the next day and give her a week to pack her things before moving back to Atlanta. Despite everything, Alice admitted she still loved her mother. Her determination was clear, and I realized Zara was in desperate need of support. I was grateful to Alice for stepping up. These past few days had shown me just how strong and resilient she was. Sam expressed his love for me and his anger at how Mom had torn our family apart. He asked if he could join me on my trip home tomorrow. I agreed without hesitation, happy to have his company. Alice got up, hugged me again, and said she would spend the night with her mom because she didn't think Zara should be left alone. As she walked out the door, she said, "Daddy, I love you." Sam and I spent the evening together, drinking several bottles of beer before he headed to his room. 5 years have passed since I exposed the gang of 6, and those years have been prosperous for me. Seeing them face the consequences of their actions has been immensely satisfying. Within a week, all 6 had been fired. Now they are divorced, jobless, and utterly alone. Their past haunts them, making it hard to hold on to any decent job. While I'd like to take credit for their downfall, another organization is keeping close tabs on them. They're trying to rebuild their lives and reconnect with their children, but it's a rough path. Their ex-spouses only reach out when they need money, and some are slowly rebuilding connections with their kids. When I returned to Atlanta and spent a night in our house, I realized I couldn't stay there any longer. The memories were too painful. I moved to a hotel while searching for a new home. Sam joined me on the trip but later moved to Dallas, Texas, where he landed his first real job. He seems happy and has been promoted 4 times. Though he's single, he's actively dating and considering joining my company this summer. Even after 5 years, his relationship with his mother remains strained. They talk on the phone occasionally, but Sam hasn't seen her since we left Orlando. On the other hand, Sam and Alice talk almost daily. The fallout from exposing the gang of 6 has deeply affected us, especially the children. I'm not sure if Sam will ever trust someone enough to marry, but Alice took Zara to Naples for a week. Alice consistently rebuffed Zara's attempts to explain, insisting she leave it to her therapist and calling it lies. Alice believes there's no adequate explanation for Zara's actions and the resulting family destruction. Moreover, Zara wasn't invited to Alice's private wedding, celebrating their first anniversary. Alice and her husband Chris now live in Atlanta. Although Alice joined my company 2 years ago, Chris chose a different path. Despite that, I value having Alice nearby. She has a natural talent for business. Alice made it clear to Chris from the beginning about the consequences of infidelity, having learned from Zara's mistakes. After exposing the Gang of Six, their spouses and children gathered in Atlanta 8 months later. Being around others who had been through similar experiences helped us all move forward. The children have formed strong bonds and continue to stay in touch. In 3 weeks, we're heading to Nashville for another meeting. When the Gang of Six began their affair, they paired up instead of forming meaningful relationships. Alice and Sam were named after Anthony's parents, forever linking them to their biological father. Even 5 years later, their relationship with Zara is strained. Alice agrees to have lunch with her, but Sam refuses to see her. Once, I was deeply in love with Zara until her deceit and infidelity shattered that. I know it's tough for some men to move forward, but I'm not one of them. Life goes on, and we have 2 choices: give up or move on. My children depended on me, and I depended on them. Zara and I agreed she would keep the house, as she felt it held too many cherished memories. I, however, saw things differently. I also settled matters with Anthony and Rick, placing the money they provided in trust funds for Alice and Sam. My goal wasn't to profit, but to ensure they felt the consequences of their actions. 6 months after finalizing our divorce, I started dating again. My main goal was to find someone special to share my love and life with. The key to a fulfilling life is both loving someone and being loved in return. Until that happens, I'll patiently wait for Alice to give me grandchildren to shower with affection. It's crucial to understand that betrayal never leads to positive outcomes. In the end, it only perpetuates a destructive cycle. Zara faced public humiliation and was punished by karma. Her relationships with men failed, and she struggled to find decent work. Currently, she's a cook in a fast food restaurant. A terrible accident occurred at work. Hot oil from a deep fryer spilled over her body, causing severe burns. Now she's in a clinic under close medical supervision.